In 1837, a particularly wealthy John Simpson stepped off a train and into MEADOWVALE village. The village itself was actually founded in 1819, and so by the time he had arrived, the community had already begun to take shape. But when John stepped off that train, he didn't see a small growing village. He saw a business opportunity, and he was a businessman. The first thing he did was purchase 200 acres of land. For metric reference, that's almost 1 square kilometer. If you took that square and laid it over the boundaries today, it would almost completely cover the village. Then 1 year later, in 1813, he commissioned the construction of a sawmill, and in doing so dammed the Credit River to create a reservoir to power his new business venture. Over the years, John Simpson would become a prominent figure in the community, regularly partitioning and selling portions of his land to newcomers, sometimes even donating his land to extended relatives as his children married into other families of the community. For all intents and purposes, John Simpson owned MEADOWVALE village. As his family married into the community, the term community felt better replaced with the word family. His virtual monopoly on land made sure that he knew every face that moved into that village, and subsequently, it meant he had a vested interest in seeing the village grow. And grow it did, because his sawmill soon proved to be a profitable business, and the portions of land he sold would soon develop into vital facilities for the people of MEADOWVALE village. At its peak, the village had multiple mills with hotels and inns to house the workers, and just across the road stood the village bank, the general store, the post office, and a very small library. Further down the road you could find the church, the school, the blacksmith, and the wagon shop. And for a small family in the mid-18th century, that's all you can really ask for. And this is where that story ends. I'm not sure what John did for the rest of his days, and truthfully it's not like it matters. While he was here, he did make a difference. The marks he left behind can still be seen today if you know where to look. For all his achievements, the name John Simpson should have been put on a plaque. And all throughout the village there are plenty of plaques, each of them with names, but none of them are his. And the reason for that is simple. John Simpson is a man that doesn't matter. So why go through all the trouble of highlighting his importance only to claim the opposite? To answer this question, we need to take a step back and look at what his achievements truly achieved. To quote Heritage Mississauga, it was due to the well-preserved historic character of the area, MEADOWVALE village became Ontario's first Heritage Conservation District in 1980. So let's take a look at what heritage is being preserved here. Most of the defining structures of the village, such as the hotels and inns that once housed the workers of the mill, have since been turned into lucrative real estate for rich families looking to settle down in a quiet neighborhood. A similar but perhaps more tragic fate was found for the village bank, the blacksmith, and the wagon shop. Unlike a small hotel, which is basically already a house, the former facilities were torn down and replaced with modern projects. The general store and post office still exist, though it's been built upon and it's barely recognizable as it stands today. The church is likely one of the only significant structures that remains in its original state, though it was converted from a Wesleyan Methodist church to a Korean United church. Not that it matters much, they both worship the same god. Like the church beside it, the village hall has also maintained its original appearance. And also like the church, before it was a village hall, it used to be a schoolhouse. Not the original schoolhouse, that one had already been demolished. The library that was founded by the MEADOWVALE Women's Institute now serves as a wastewater pumping station, which I think perfectly reflects the suffragette movement. All jokes aside, and yes, that was a joke, there is one structure I have yet to talk about. And if you've been listening at all, you already know it's the sawmill, John Simpson's crowning achievement to MEADOWVALE village. I wish I could show you how big it actually was. I wish I could show you all the intricate mechanics that made the mill run, but it's gone now. But this isn't even where the mill used to be, and this stone wasn't for the sawmill, it was for a grist mill further downstream. And so it would appear that despite all his contributions, almost none of them were retained, presumably because John Simpson was a man that didn't matter. In 1986, a time capsule was buried just outside that library wastewater pump. 20 years later, in 2006, that same time capsule was dug up and removed. It's not my place to say what length of time constitutes history. 20 years? 200 years? Nor is it my place to define what history even is. Regardless of where you draw the line, one thing in this village stands true. The places that once defined the village now cease to exist. Their insides have been renovated and gutted of any historical significance. The bloodlines that once resided in their walls and held together that village family have left, and new families have moved in. For any average person, the only historical thing about this village is the way that some of the buildings look. And if it weren't for the sign and these plaques, most people wouldn't even notice that. I interviewed the current day residents of MEADOWVALE Village, and honestly, I'm wary to be critical about the area, because most of them are very nice people. But the facts of the matter don't change just because people are nice. As one of the residents put it, the district is heritage, but the houses are not. But if you really walk around MEADOWVALE Village, it's hard to imagine there was any village at all. It takes some serious research and exploration to piece together where the village once stood, and the plaques aren't all that helpful in that process. It's likely the plaques of heritage are just being used to raise the price of real estate, and have little to do with preserving their historical value. Almost 200 years after its foundation, MEADOWVALE Village stands today as just another neighborhood in a multitude of other neighborhoods, and arguably that was always going to be its fate. Despite his best efforts, the center of commerce John Simpson helped to cultivate wouldn't stand the test of time. In the years after his peak, John Simpson wouldn't go on to do anything noteworthy, and the same could be said for MEADOWVALE Village. The village and John share a lot in common, and it's likely for this reason the heritage site was allowed to be built over. It's because they don't really matter. In the early stages of researching this video, I visited the village hall and saw an old wooden plaque with words that I couldn't quite make out. I took a picture of it, hoping to decipher what it said. A few weeks later, when I had returned to the building, the plaque had been removed. I can only hope their intention is to restore the sign to its original state and return it to its rightful place. Make no mistake, despite all my criticism, I don't hate MEADOWVALE Village. Quite the opposite, in fact. I wish a better effort was made to preserve what history remains in this area. But if this video is any basis for reality, I wouldn't be surprised if that was the last time I ever saw that sign.